What's going on, guys? It is Illuminostic, and I am streaming tonight to talk about ayahuasca again. We had an ayahuasca stream the other night, and it was pretty solid. I think. Hopefully, this one will be even better. Yesterday, I think it was, we were in Tena, which is a city near our house, and we discovered that there was a new artisanal ice cream shop open that served ayahuasca ice cream made with actual ayahuasca paste. And I know, a lot of you might be saying, why? And are you guys getting distortion? Let me know in the chat if you are. The light's green, but it sounds crackly. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, they and a lot of people might say, like, how dare you eat sugar with ayahuasca or dairy, or actually mix ayahuasca with animal products. And, it's just kind of silly, I think. The really strict, hardcore ayahuasca dieta crowd. It's not intended to be a psychoactive treat. It's just, anytime you consume ayahuasca, it's going to have benefits. It's an immunomodulator, and it has very strong anti-inflammation properties, and it's just all around helpful. So honestly, though, after about like 4 or 5 bites of it, if you tried to eat a whole bowl, it gets pretty bitter. The medicine kind of accumulates on your tongue, but I was actually surprised because ayahuasca is gross when you drink it, like as a ceremonial drink. There are a few things that are worse, and it's strange because it's almost like there's an association with the taste, because it actually doesn't taste that bad in a way. It's just like you just feel like you're just gonna vomit as soon as you see it, But at any rate, I wanted to talk kind of about my approach to all this and what my objectives are as a facilitator, and how I feel like I use the medicine in a little bit different context than a lot of people might traditionally, because there are different ways to approach ayahuasca. And one of the most obnoxious things about the industry to me is that people seem to think there is an absolute right way to be a shaman, or an absolutely correct dieta, or, you have to sing the Icaros exactly the way that this guy did. And, having studied shamanism, South American shamanism in particular, for, many decades, and having the opportunity to look at it well before the industry had corrupted it, it's really about forging your own individual style. Everyone must ultimately become their own shaman. At least I think in the current paradigm, that's what needs to happen for people. Traditionally, there would generally only be one shaman per, village, not per tribe, but per village. And, of course, with the advent of the ayahuasca industry, now all of a sudden every single, Shipibo person on the entire face of the earth is a shaman. And, it's definitely blurring the definition of what it really means to be a shaman. And again, it creates this huge vector of convergence of different ideas about what is acceptable and what is correct. And the reality is that, you should have your own ayahuasca songs. It's okay to sing other people's ayahuasca songs, but you should have your own ayahuasca songs. You should have your own style. You should have your own approach. You honor the traditions by incorporating the techniques that are efficacious and are helpful, and keeping the knowledge preserved as traditionally as possible. But, you innovate your own style. In fact, the only person that I would really consider a direct teacher of mine, he always said, do not watch the hands of your master. You can kind of get a general idea of like what techniques are important and what, serves you. But stylistically and the intricacies of it, you should not imitate that. Also, I think that in the modern paradigm, I guess, it's important that facilitators have a multidisciplinary approach. A lot of people, just give people the medicine and they sing, and they may regulate the energies in their circle the way that they should, and everything's fine. But there's no interaction before the ceremony, and there's no integration after the ceremony. And even if there is, the person has zero understanding of psychology, maybe, or therapeutic techniques, or psychoanalysis. And so for me, I think it's really important that people that get involved with this, at least for the Westerners or outsiders, that people have a multidisciplinary background. And I'm not talking about a PhD in psychology necessarily, or certified in Jungian psychoanalysis or whatever it is. But to at least have the self-motivation to go and study psychoanalysis, and to have just at least a basic framework for the ideas and tenets of psychology, which admittedly is not super easy, because there's a lot of conflict, and the terrain is always changing, and there are some really conflicting ideas currently in psychology. For example, some people say that going back over trauma from your past is actually totally counterproductive, and that it shouldn't actually be done at all, when of course in a lot of other schools of thinking, that's an absolute necessity. And for me, I think it absolutely is correct to do that. The fairy tales where the kids realize the witch has cast a spell, and that simple realization that a spell has been cast is enough to break the spell. And in the real world, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but you'd be surprised how often it can be that just the knowledge of the first cause, the prima mobile behind some kind of behavior or addiction, or neurosis or phobia, that just simply shining the light on it and realizing, making that connection, the thing topples over, and it causes a domino effect oftentimes of all, because there are associations. So once you isolate the cause of a phobia and you neutralize it, it is just going to, by way of association, it's going to cause the dissolution of the networks that are associated with that original trauma. So, in my opinion, that is one of the great values, really, of ayahuasca, because it enhances memory, and it enhances recall, and it allows you to very vividly go back into the distant past, and there may be repressed or suppressed memories. As a facilitator, I'm often surprised at the depth of people's ability to do this. A lot of psychologists argue that there aren't really any such thing as repressed memories or suppressed memories, that people don't actually do that. And of course, you run the risk of planting them, and that can cause a whole different host of issues. But I think I've seen so many times now, people go back and uncover these memories, and the reason that they seem, correct, is that there are behaviors that did not have a causal, you can't find where they go, like what the impetus was that created these problems in the first place. And then this memory comes up, and suddenly everything has context. And so, that's why I don't think that people are just fabricating these memories, and that it actually is a really common experience to bring these things to light with ayahuasca. Of course, the danger is that you can bring something up that has been suppressed for a reason. And if the medicine is strong, sometimes that causes people to be totally overwhelmed, and that's when things can get, dangerous for people. If for no other reason, just because they might flail around a bunch, But it's, definitely something that you have to be very cautious with, really trying to intentionally lead people back to suppressed memories. I've definitely seen situations where I believe that the facilitator or the shaman is actually planting ideas in the person's head based on their own beliefs, and the person will accept that. And that can have pretty terrible repercussions. Definitely seen that more than once. So, it takes a tremendous amount of awareness. And I think that the fact that we have so many facilitators that don't have any real knowledge of how people's psyche works. And they also have a lot of judgments, their own cultural influences. The influence of Christianity and the Judeo-Christian influence down here in the Amazon has put a lot of really bad ideas into a lot of people's heads that create judgment and create really inappropriate interpretations of, phenomena that their clients are expressing. And it can be quite ridiculous. And generally, actually, it usually is the religious influence, I think, that compels people to, react badly to certain things like homosexuality. That's one that I think there's quite often a negative response to, or an inappropriate interpretation on the part of a lot of facilitators that are coming from, much more conservative culture where Catholicism is very heavily influencing. And then something I haven't talked about too much that a couple of people have asked me about is, what are the limitations of plant medicine and ayahuasca and psychedelics in general? At our retreats, by the way, we don't just drink ayahuasca. We also use psilocybin, mostly at a low dose in a tea with plants like uña de gato, guayusa, mimosa pudica. There are different configurations depending on what individuals need and the season and whatnot. But yeah, we try to use whatever is appropriate for any particular group, and we also don't really stick to a schedule as much as kind of just sense, where's the best place to go at any particular juncture. The groups are very small too, so it's kind of easy to keep everyone on the same page. And I really don't like large groups at ayahuasca ceremonies because you have all these divergent personalities, so you have divergent needs, and it's much more difficult to attenuate what's happening for each individual when there are 20 or 30 people. So that's why our maximum is 10, and usually there are less. But what I was saying is, sorry, I lost my chat. The limitations, what happened to the chat? Oh, here we go. The limitations of plant medicine and, what they can't do for you. Someone in particular asked me to address this, and the problem with it is that making a blank statement about this. By the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. We're demonetized, so all of our support comes from you, and so we definitely appreciate it. But it's difficult to make blanket statements about this stuff because people react very differently to everything. There are some generalizations that can be made that are, pretty accurate. And so when you're talking about the limitations or applications of any one of the psychedelic medicines, there are certain things that are better at doing certain jobs, right? Even though there's a lot of overlap. So, I think I talked about this in the last stream that ayahuasca can actually cause ego inflation instead of, healthy ego integration, which is how I prefer to think about it versus dissolution. Ego dissolution, I think, is just kind of a silly and crazy idea. As a temporary goal, sure, an experience of ego death can be very helpful and cause a lot of growth. But the general goal of dissolving ego, I don't think is really the thing. It's about learning to dance with the devil, so to speak. But yeah, that's just a really good example is that ayahuasca oftentimes doesn't really do much to deal with ego. Its focus is usually physical stuff, which is not to say necessarily healing those things directly, but directing the person or the shaman. For me, it's a conversation directly with me, but I guess for a lot of people, I act as an intermediary. But the medicine directs the attention to plants that might be useful, changes of habit, and it can even be an insight regarding an apparently unrelated association that results in some sort of change of health. So the change of general disposition, or even a new level of organization. There are all kinds of surprising messages that can come through the medicine and have all sorts of different results. But for ayahuasca, it's mostly emotional and physical stuff that is addressed. And sometimes in that process, the ego is totally left unchecked. And I see over and over and over again people that I think largely due to the influence of New Age spirituality, where there's no initiation, there is no standard. And you're coming from a culture where people don't respect the office of the magician or the shaman or the mystic. It's just kind of the consensus is that those are people that just make stuff up, and then sometimes they believe themselves and sometimes other people believe them. People don't really understand anymore that there is a very technical spiritual science like scientific illuminism or, real metaphysics, where there is a structure and there is a protocol and there is a proper order in the development. In the Western occult tradition, for example, you begin as a neophyte. And then become a dweller on the threshold when you are awaiting the early stages of walking through the door of illumination. And then once you've done that, you have to cross the abyss, because now you know that you know nothing. You don't know who you are anymore. You have lost all that you are and all that you had, and you must cross the abyss and risk getting torn apart by the demon Karanzan, who is the demon of confusion, right? And all of this is just allegory. It's not literal, although it sure can feel literal. And then oftentimes there's the dark night of the soul. And then after the dark night of the soul, if you make it through that, then there's a new sun that rises, and it's the golden dawn, and all along the way, there are all sorts of very specific things that happen to people, like the vision of the peacock and the star sponge vision, and all these things that it's actually really extraordinary how consistent it is. But the problem is, if you do not develop the healthy relationship with the shadow and the ego before you expand your consciousness, then the ego swells to fill that void created by the expansion of consciousness. Something is going to enter into there. And if you don't have wisdom, it's not going to be wisdom. And if you don't have heart, it's not going to be love. You know what I mean? So that's why, before you make the vacuum larger, you have to regulate what is going to be present to enter into that vacuum. And so what I'm saying is, in pop culture spirituality, we don't really have that structure. There aren't a lot of good guides out there. The profit motive has completely polluted and contaminated the waters. So it's really difficult for people. And, that's the most common thing that happens. People believe, that channeling is just a matter of anyone sitting down and clearing their mind and listening, and now they're getting messages from the stars. And, in my opinion, the only time to take that kind of intuition seriously is if you are able to check it and consistently are correct. Otherwise, you should take it with a grain of salt. And, I actually have a good friend right now that I think has gone off the rails on the Woo-Choo train because of all this. There's no background in metaphysics, doesn't understand the basic fundamental knowledge that we have so that you can build from it. And then another terrible consequence of this that can happen is that if you build a structure with a faulty foundation, the entire structure is going to eventually topple over. So you can waste a tremendous amount of time and energy starting with a bad premise and building upon that. That's, part of the reason why I like to work so much directly with people and get to know them before the retreat as much as possible. And I talk to people a lot during the retreat and after the retreat so that, we can try to make sure that it's actually that you're going to be able to make investitures of the spiritual insights and development that you get, because Otherwise, you're just expanding ego into a void, and that's not going to work out very well for you. By the way, if you guys have questions about anything, go ahead and place them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them. Also, I wanted to ask you guys in the community, particularly if you are a member of Discord, because it's easiest for me to find it there. Ayahuasca used to be really well known as a I don't know what to call it, an agent of telepathy or something, a catalyst for precognition. And it was actually used by a shaman to get information, not really so much to heal. It might tell them which plants to use to heal someone, and it does that remarkably accurately. But it was not specifically used to heal really anything. It was just for getting information. Where is the enemy coming from? Where is the herd of animals going to be tomorrow? You know, what minerals do I need to consume to protect myself from some virus? That kind of thing. And so what I've noticed is that as this ayahuasca renaissance has gained steam and it's become super popular, that attention to that particular area seems to have completely vanished. So I just wanted to ask people if you see any studies that seem reputable on this idea of, you know, ayahuasca and telepathy and remote viewing and all of that. Please let me know about it, because I'm curious to see, are we ignoring that because we don't want to have the image of being wackos, you know what I mean, and kind of associating psychedelic medicine with things that people believe are loony? Or I'm not really sure why that happened. And it's, you know, particularly confusing because there was evidence. It's not like, you know, it was just something hippies were saying or something. The anthropological record going back hundreds of years has all these instances. Sir Walter Raleigh, for example, the explorer, he was told by a shaman that I can know anything when I drink the ayahuasca. And so he said, well, then tell me something you couldn't know. And the shaman said, your sister is dead. And it turned out that he got a letter, you know, a week later or whatever, saying his sister had indeed died the day before the shaman told him. And that was like 1734 or something. And so there are instances of this also throughout the anthropological record. There are, you know, 1950s records. Richard Evans Schultes is one that made several of these accounts. He was a professor of ethnobotany at Harvard. Very, very interesting guy. If you're unfamiliar, get familiar, I would suggest. He wrote a book called Plants of the Gods with Dr. Albert Hoffman, who synthesized LSD for the first time. Schultes was pretty extraordinary. He was kind of like a psychedelic Indiana Jones. He actually got lost in the rainforest for like 12 years and lived with tribes. And when he finally came out, he was dragging this I don't know, like trays. I can't remember what they called it, but it was like trays of plants on some like runners. And he's dragging this, and there's like thousands of new species. He found a plateau in Peru where 99% of all the vegetation was psychoactive. All kinds of craziness from that guy, Richard Evans Schultes. But yeah, he documented all sorts of instances of shamans knowing that there was an Eiffel Tower and describing it, and street corners in China and the pyramids and all this stuff. And it's not just one, you know, there are plenty of accounts of that. And then there were experiments done in 1963 by masters in Houston, two PhD medical doctors. And, you know, this was in the golden age of psychedelic research when it was still legal. Another huge pet peeve of mine, that people seem to think that all of these discoveries about, you know, psychedelics helping with addiction and depression and all of these things, that this is actually a new discovery. That's just totally bogus. It's not real at all. This information has been, you know, that's what the researchers were saying in the 1960s when they banned the compounds. They were not warning that they were dangerous and that they should be illegal. That never happened. But so, yeah, they did experiments with ayahuasca where they had someone drink the ayahuasca on one floor of a building, and then they separated them by several floors. I don't know what the purpose of that is. You'd think a different room would be good enough, but they separated them by several floors, and they had them look at not the person that drank, but the other person, pictures of stuff that was really crazy, like, you know, somebody skiing down a mountain, mountains on flames. What's going on, Paula? Mountains in flames. There's a UFO hovering or whatever, you know, and the point of that was that they wanted to reduce the possibility of chance, people getting accurate guesses. And their conclusion from those experiments was that, the people were like 99% accurate or something. There was a lot of really interesting information that those two dug up. They injected 1,000 people with DMT at one point, and they said that like 90% of the people that saw God, not that 90% saw God, but 90% of the people that said that they saw God when injected with DMT described God as a jeweled cat. Which always struck me as like really, like why? Is God actually a jeweled cat? Is that even like remotely possible? And it, those kind of things. How's it going, Gabby? Those kind of things open up all sorts of other questions. If God's not actually a jeweled cat, is there some archetypal connection between the idea of cat and jewel and God? Obviously the Egyptians worshipped cats. And in my opinion, the Egyptians did have ayahuasca, although it wasn't the same ayahuasca that is consumed in South America. And there is some evidence of this, although it's scant, but acacia was sacred to Osiris. It was scattered all around the graves of any mystery school initiate. In fact, it's still sprinkled on the graves of Freemasons when they are buried, and it contains DMT. And so Syrian rue and acacia mixed together would have been available in that area. And unlike the Amazon rainforest, where there's just tons of plants, incredible. In fact, we found a new fruit today that I've been here 3 years in a relatively small area, and suddenly there's a basket full of some crazy fruit. Like you pulled it open and it had this like resin in it that was white and it would stretch almost like bubble gum. It's crazy. I'll post a video of it when I'm done, or maybe tomorrow or something. But where was I at with this? Oh yeah, so acacia rue. This is the drink of the mysteries, I think. And it's also possible that Pythagoras, everyone knows about the Kichwa and soome in the Vedic and Greek mysteries. And there's all this argument about what it might have been, right? But ergot is actually less likely than I think a lot of people think, because if you consume ergot without going through a very specific fermentation process, it'll cause insanity, gangrene-like sores where your limbs will start to rot off, and you'll go completely insane. So the experimentation process with ergot would have been really difficult. Whereas, acacia and rue would have been pretty easy to get the ratio accidentally correct. And, and also it's available in both places, in Greece and the Mediterranean, and at least parts of Egypt. So pretty interesting. I've always thought that the knowledge to get the pyramids together might have come from some psychedelic insight. Also, just the necessity of putting the pyramids together at all may have come from, psychedelic insight. The Egyptians also used a ton of blue lotus, which is an interesting plant in and of itself. I feel like I went off of our original trajectory pretty steeply. But I know we were talking about the limitations of psychedelics and the benefits. And I guess the general message that I was going for is that psychedelics by themselves are not necessarily enough. And that doesn't mean that certain individuals might not attain to very, very high level of illumination using only psychedelics. That's definitely true, I think. But the context is generally really important for most normal people. And so my approach basically is to try to engineer the life of our clients to help them do that, so that there are flow state triggers everywhere possible. And so, I know I talk about this a lot, but it's super important, and it's something you can do even if you don't want to come to the retreat. First of all, eating foods that are high in dopamine precursors, L-dopa, so fava beans, red velvet bean, mucuna, I think is another name for it. There are other beans I think that have a lot of it. And of course, the exercise and meditation. But I think a lot of people are missing the creative element, and in particular, music. Music is sort of a meditation that requires the engagement of a lot of different parts of the brain. If you're singing and playing an instrument in particular, there's an awful lot going on. And the ambidexterity that's required to, say, play the guitar or piano requires you to engage both sides of the brains at once. And you're doing different tasks that are related but unrelated, and that's really important. And then the concentration is a huge element, and then taking chances if you're improvising. You know what I mean? So there are just so many opportunities to expand consciousness, develop intelligence, to improve memory, and to enter even into transcendental states through the practice of playing improvisational music, that I feel like if you're going to have some psychedelic experience, if you can sort of bottleneck that with learning to play an instrument, especially in an improvisational setting, it's really going to serve you in terms of your ability to develop your mind and develop yourself. And that's just a tremendous, tremendous aspect of it. And then, of course, the mindfulness practice, you watching your mind all the time, watching your behaviors and training yourself not to lose attention ever to your train of thought. But not just that. The goal of life, in my opinion, and in the opinion of Plato and Socrates and Aleister Crowley, and just about every major mind that I can think of said this in one way, shape, or form. Playing guitar on LSD and mushrooms is like the best thing ever. I did it the other day and posted it on the channel. It went all right. I was really, really tired, and I had just gotten some really bad news, so it was kind of hard to focus on what I was doing, but it actually came out decent. But yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to do that. And also, because of the enhanced neuroplasticity and neurogenesis that you derive from psychedelics, particularly LSD actually has the highest potentiating of neurogenesis and neuroplasticity of all the psychedelics. If you're playing an instrument, if you learn something in that state, you're actually going to retain the information better. Studies have been done on this, and the way the researcher described it was that it's as if the information is branded into the brain rather than having to be assimilated by rote or repetition, right? So it's just the neuroplasticity. You could basically think of it as being soft and literally taking a stamp. So yeah, it's, and the trick is to make sure that the dose is navigable. You don't want to be overwhelmed and confused, unable to concentrate. That's not going to work for you. But yeah, if you can get right in there in the sweet spot and do any kind of activity like that. In fact, it's come out in recent years that X Games athletes will quite routinely take 100 micrograms of LSD before competition, and the guys that don't do it consider it cheating because your response time is improved so much, your balance is improved so much. There's all these different aspects of your cognitive capacities and their relationship to the body that are dramatically improved as long as you don't go overboard. But let's see, I was heading somewhere else with with this. We talked about the importance of music. Oh, the mindfulness, because concentration is one way that people get into flow state, right? So if you're speaking of playing guitar, you get into flow state while you're improvising, magical things happen. You transcend your normal ability levels. And also you release a bunch of dopamine, and there's all kinds of good things that happen. But with a mindfulness practice that is integrated into your total existence, you are you have that focus all the time. And the reason you're going to have that focus is because you discover your true will. That's where I was going with that earlier. I got derailed. Know thyself, right? The real meaning of that is that if you don't have some purpose that you are fundamentally aligned with and that you are totally committed to and that gives definition and meaning to your life, you're going to be unhappy. People have this idea that you're like obligated to get a 9-to-5 job, whether you like it or not, and just work and work and work until you die. And then you eat, shit, sleep, work, occasionally fuck, and that's it. That's your life, The necessity, the reason that the oceans are testing positive for Xanax and school shootings and all that is crisis of purpose. People don't know what they're here for. And the abject materialism of the modern culture is not meaningful to anyone. The purposelessness of it literally drives people insane left and right. And the thing is, the alternative that people have, or at least as people have perceived it, is that you're either the abject materialist atheist or you're religious. And that's not going to do anything for you either. That just traps your mind. And that religion includes even just, if you believe in pop culture spiritual ideas, just because you feel like they're alternative and therefore they must be true or something. I'm not really sure how people go about it. But I have noticed that it seems like once people decide that they're going to be open to that, they generally just accept it all as real. And that is no protocol at all. That is not prudent. It's not prudent. By the way, you guys, also, don't fear the chat, and the like button. Don't be afraid of the like button. And also, we appreciate contributions, and we're booking for October, and I'm doing, if you want to come for a single one-on-one before October, that can be arranged as well. But yeah, full month of October, send me an email to proton.me. But what I'm getting at is that once you have established the singular purpose, then you are training your attention, your consciousness, your being on that thing all the time and developing a mindful practice so that you are constantly steering your consciousness into a narrow channel, right? And it's not narrow in the sense that you're not learning about other things, but everything you learn is constrained to that purpose, to serve that purpose. So you're still learning all about nature, you're still studying mathematics, and intellectual laziness, if you can overcome that, I'm finding that is a tremendous boon to all this stuff. Because the reality is, if you start using psychedelics correctly, your brain is going to have more capacity, right? In order to run a program of higher consciousness, you need to upgrade the hardware. You can't run an Apple or like a Mac app on a 1984 Commodore 64. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. So that's, part of the beauty of these psychedelic compounds, having the ability to upgrade your hardware in the terms of neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, right? It's pretty crazy if you think about it, that they just have this innate function to connect you to the transcendental, expand your capacity for perception, but then also allow you to rewire your brain so that you have the processing power to navigate the new terrain. Really quite remarkable. And then, if you're really serious about this kind of development, you are going to start studying mathematics again. I have been really pushing myself over the last couple of months. I'm 44 years old, and suddenly I've started, revisiting all of this more advanced mathematics. One of the things that kind of encouraged me to do that, though, is that I discovered the Pythagorean Illuminati and Mike Hockney. And those guys basically claim to be the real Illuminati, and I don't doubt it one little bit. I mean, it's not the group that is controlling the world, but that's never been the Illuminati. The Illuminati were basically rationalist people that were seeking illumination and trying to get rid of religion and borders so that there was no more war and no more ignorance. That's really what it was about, trying to teach, rational illumination. Yeah, I mean, and what you find out is that those more advanced modalities of learning, you're learning calculus. You're changing the trajectory of your thoughts, the shapes of your thoughts. And so there's a new radial curve, and that allows you to have a new vector. You know what I mean? Where new ideas meet in ways and in places that they never could have before. The mind is holographic in nature. In fact, the evidence for that is really becoming more and more abundant. When you look at the work of Michael Levin, I'm always talking about him lately, but I think he's probably the most important scientist on the planet right now. Basically, another Einstein, only his territory is morphology and morphogenetics, kind of the same thing. But part of his theoretical framework is the idea that he calls it mind everywhere, right? And so this really remarkable idea that you find in the Kabbalion and lots of other systems, Buddhism really alludes to it pretty directly, is that, the external world is mind and the internal world is obviously mind. But yeah, because of the holographic nature of the mind is actually what I was getting to. When you create a precedent in terms of a pattern in your mind in one area, it is now available to the holistic brain, so that these understandings can be repurposed, and then they're able to create different networks. And so if you combine, a really ambitious learning regimen with consumption of psychedelics, I mean, you have no idea what the limitations are, too. No one does. Because although it's not common, there have literally been people in a clinical setting that went from below average IQ to literal genius, and they stayed that way. There's been 2 cases that have happened in a clinical setting. So that's just 2, in a research setting, but how many have just occurred randomly? I mean, you have no idea what the potential, maximum potential of these kind of activities can be if it's done properly with the right attitude, the right context, and the right setting. It really is pretty limitless, and then when you go back to the beginning of our conversation and look at it from a therapeutic point of view, there's a domino effect of dealing with trauma, of healing trauma. Once you have done that, you generally will find that you will have dissolved perceptions of limitations of yourself, beliefs about your own limitations. Your confidence improves, your courage improves, you're less fearful, you're more adventurous, and therefore you're also more intelligent because you are more inclined to problem solving, and you're going to start seeing new connections in your environment, and new connections between people, and new connections between systems, and new possibilities. And all of this growth happens exponentially. So once you create this network, this spidering, like, rock hitting glass and spidering out in one category, because the mind is holographic, then you're going to see that same ability to create new external neural network patterns, which is basically what it is. And, it is a very interesting time. We are on the edge of the greatest catalyst in human history, really. And even more remarkably, it's actually a number of catalysts that are all potentially greater than most or any that have preceded them. We have AI emerging at exactly the same time as artificial or alien intelligence. Alien intelligence and artificial intelligence showing up on the scene at the same time is not a coincidence. It's isomorphic resonance. It is a higher order of symmetry that always expresses in the universe, and I feel like it's a validation of my prediction that I made years ago on this channel that we would start to experience synchronicities collectively once we started to individuate as a species. In other words, to build the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious, or the conscious and the collective mind. And I feel like that's actually happening. And that is why, it's not, they've always been there, but we'll actually start to notice, alien intelligence and artificial intelligence, even the same abbreviation, and possibly the same thing. one may grow from the other, for all we know. But, there's a cluster of it. There's quantum computing. It's only going to be a few years before that is, fully fleshed out and fully developed. And then when quantum computing merges with artificial intelligence, there's going to be a necessity for tremendous storage, storage requirements. And just so happens that we have now DNA-based, storage for information that is going to allow all of this technology to combine. And I'm sure you guys can see where I'm going with this. And so I feel like we have to prepare ourselves to be as evolutionarily available as possible. No seed can flourish unless it is planted into fertile ground. And so, this is the time that we have to consciously engineer ourselves for adaptation. People talk about Darwinism and they say that the strongest will survive, and it's not actually the strongest, it's the most adaptable. And the reality is that our reality interface is about to re-engineer itself at light speed, and it's about to complexify and simplify simultaneously in ways that are going to be absolutely astounding. And again, that's that isomorphic resonance again, where it's going to complexify and simplify simultaneously. It's that alien intelligence and artificial intelligence, a different spectrum of these expressions of the fact that the universe is a perfect union of contrary things. That is how it is created. That's a necessity for its development and existence. And so, as you pick up on this knowledge and assimilate it and assimilate all the other knowledge that you can and prepare to make this merger with hyperspace and hypertechnology at the same time, I'm not going to claim to know and understand exactly what that's going to mean, but the changes are going to happen so quickly and so profoundly, and it's very alarming to me as well that the world governments don't seem to have really prepared people. They knew all this was coming, and they did not bother to start training people how to live in a world that's run by AI and preparing people for the, where the job's going to go. Even CEOs are done. You know what I mean? It's a really incredibly dynamic period to navigate, I'm afraid. I mean, I'm excited to an extent too, but I think, without being, without promoting fear, well, unfortunately, it's not that simple. I have to hook up my music rig in order to play music. I almost wouldn't mind. It's not really that late, but it would take me a second to put it together. Oh, and I lost my last pick. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do about that. Picks are 400 miles away. So if anyone wants to come to the Amazon rainforest and bring me a package of Dunlop Jazz 3s, that would be extremely appreciated. But so, yeah, you guys, fertile soil to plant these seeds because, we need to be prepared for what's coming. We need to be worthy of the changes. And I think we have to accept that the people that do not engage dynamically are probably going to... the microphone won't pick it up is what I'm saying. It doesn't plug in. I would have to switch microphones in order to play the acoustic. Yeah, I mean, you'll get left behind. That's the thing about life. People should have faith in their inner guides and the support or the idea that the universe is supporting you, right? Pronoia is much more useful than paranoia. Pronoia is the belief that the universe is conspiring to help you. But regardless of that, if you don't make the necessary adaptations and preparations in times of abundant change, then you are going to be obsolete. And so you have to be just very thankful, I think, that psychedelics have arrived when they have, and that you have the knowledge and the intention. And you must also make sure that you have the discipline and willpower, because the most complete set of talents and virtues is totally useless in the absence of willpower and discipline. But if you can bring all these things together, you can catalyze tremendous growth. And speaking of tremendous growth, I'm really trying to grow some community, because I feel like one of the most powerful things we can have right now is like-minded people that are willing to share skills and to share advice. So don't forget to join my Discord. There's lots of useful information in there, lots of cool people in there. I think we only have 50 or 60 members so far. But yeah, and everyone, please smash the like button. I am demonetized, so I get nothing for my efforts, so we really appreciate it when people send contributions to PayPal, Zelle, or cryptocurrency, or Cash App. All of those addresses are in the chat. Yeah, and so JungleGnosis still booking for October, and then that's it. That's the end of, that's game over in the Amazon, I think. After that, I'm going to probably to the coast for a while. I don't know if we'll do anything there. I kind of doubt it. And then I may come back to California after maybe another year or something. I'm not going back to North America, though, until I'm very financially well padded. So there's certain machinations that I'm kind of waiting before I take a chance on going back up there and getting sucked in. Just asking about the guitar. I wish I had a pick, man. It's unbelievable that I actually managed to lose the pick. But, you know, turn on your bell notifications. That's the one metric. By the way, we're at 80,000 views this month. Thank you guys so much for that. That is 4 times where we were last month. So that's crazy. Turn on your bell notifications, please, because that's the only metric that I'm well below average on YouTube for. Everything else is really high. That one's not great. So I appreciate if you guys turn on your bell notifications. If I have a few minutes, I'll tell you what I'll do, Paula, if I can. I got to check with my partner, because our house is being renovated right now, or the retreat center is being renovated to prepare for October. You know, got to make sure that there's not a lot of dangerous animals and stuff in there, and also get the septic under control and whatnot. So we are at a lodge nearby, and we're sharing a room with my son. So I have to make sure they're not going to bed in the next 30 minutes or so. And if not, then if you watch for your notification, I'll do a few songs. So if you guys, even with all notifications on, I always get notifications later after I post. Oh, I see. Yeah, that sucks, because people don't generally like to watch lives on the rerun as much. Man, I wish I had started now, kind of, because there's 14 people, which is the highest we've had. And I think this was a pretty useful stream. So you know what, you guys, if you missed, you go back and rewatch this one, because I think I covered a lot of important stuff, especially in the last 20 minutes or so. I think that was stuff that all needed to be said. So yeah, you guys, October, send an email to JungleGnosis@proton.me. Send contributions to our PayPal and Zelle. Click like buttons, turn on bell notifications, all that stuff. And I've got some crazy videos coming out this week. Speaking of mathematics, about 3, 6, and 9, and all of these mystical numbers. Because it turns out that even without the mysticism, they all have these weird functions. They're not just, you know, numbers that people have superstitions about. They're not at all. In fact, I'll give you an example right now that is really crazy. And I don't even know if I can explain it correctly, because I'm not a mathematician, but and I'm going to post the video. Maybe I should just wait till I post the video. But basically, 666, if you reverse it and do something with inverse square ratios, it becomes exactly the golden mean. So it's like evil one way and life the other way. Live, evil, but it's the math version of that. I mean, there's all kinds of just mind-boggling stuff like that that's coming in these videos. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me, and I'll be back with more stuff and junk and crap and things as well later this week.